Welcome back to Big Sky Buckets. I'm Big Sky, and today we're going to go over the Elite Eight. I know we could go over the Sweet 16, a lot of upsets in the Sweet 16. Absolutely incredible Thursday and Friday night of basketball. But we're going to talk about the Elite Eight. We're going to talk about all 8 teams, actually, and talk about, in particular, one guy on each team that probably helped their draft stock. Because at this point, you're getting to the point where guys that weren't even considered in the draft before, when you make it this far, you start getting, even if it's in the second round, which there will be a second day of watching the draft for the NBA for the first time ever. I know a lot of people aren't going to watch that. I will, because I've been watching March Madness a lot, and I think a lot of these guys are going to find themselves in the second round. So we'll start with the teams that moved on, and then we're going to talk about the teams that didn't. One player in particular, and then specifically for the teams that lost, what happened. Before we get started, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I'd appreciate all the subscriptions, likes, comments, all of that, and all the support in general as I get this thing up and going. It would mean a lot. And let's jump into it. So the 4 teams moving on, let's talk about the 2 players that are 2 sides of the same coin, in my opinion. They belong to the 2 best teams left. And we're going to start with the Zach Edey dilemma. So I come on here again and basically say that I don't know if my opinion has changed at all, despite how incredible this guy is in college basketball. Zach Edey, in do or die game, Elite Eight, to make the Final Four, gave you 40 and 16. That's really damn good. Here's the issue. He goes to the free throw line 22 times. And that's not even an issue in and of itself. I don't really need to go over him being slow. I don't need to go over that again. But I do want to wonder if the idea is simply, because even I am having a hard time buying his stock. I do think a team is going to draft him in the first round. There's no question that someone has to take that gamble. Who that is, I do not know. Where that is in the first round, I also do not know. But at 7'4", 300 pounds, he is utterly dominant offensively, and I do think, I want to state this again, to get the best of Zach Edey in the NBA, I do think you're going to have to run your offense through him, because that's what he's been asked to do a couple years in a row now at Purdue. It's what made him National Player of the Year last year. It's what's making him look like the best player left in college basketball this year. And that's the question, is like with the traditional styled center who can't really score outside of like 5 feet from the basket, maybe 7, who gets fouled a lot and really banking on those free throws to really carry the team sometimes. There's not really a center in the NBA that dominates from 5 feet from the basket all the time, that doesn't stretch the floor in any capacity. Can the pendulum swing back to that? Can that be just as dominant in the NBA as it once was and not is currently? That's the question, and that's what makes it so hard, because the casual fan will watch him in college basketball and say, how is this guy, or even coaches in college basketball will be like, how is this guy not a lottery pick? And I think it's just really hard to explain that. I just think to me, it feels like a bygone era until someone shows me it can be done again. Even Jokic, who does get a lot of points from inside, like 5 feet from the basket, because he has that incredible touch, the floaters, the hooks, all of that. The thing that makes him stand out is the IQ, the passing, and the rebounding as well. Now, the rebounding is great from Zach Edey. The shooting is like, yeah, it's bagless, but it's effective, right? So there's a lot of questions there. I don't really have too much to say other than that. It's just, if he goes all the way, I think you do have to buy some of the stock. I think you have to accept that, all right, he dominated college basketball all the way through. And the main 2 things will be when he plays DJ Burns next, because I think that's a big game for DJ Burns. If DJ Burns can win that, we're really talking draft stuff here. But if Zach Edey can move on, then it's like, all right, you have only one more player you really have to prove it against, which is the other side of the coin. The reason I'm higher on Donovan Clingan is actually for all the opposite things that make him great. He is not an offensive hub. He is good at passing. He really put that on display against Illinois this time. But it's the defense. He's been one of the best, if not the best, defensive player in college basketball during March Madness, in my opinion. He had that one game early on where he almost had a triple-double blocks. 8 blocks in a game is incredible. He's a simple rim protecting big that can run some plays for you, which is really nice in a game that's evolving like in the NBA right now, where teams are running through centers. And the main thing that Zach Edey is much more of a offensive hub scoring engine than Donovan Clingan could be in terms of his offense, more passing than it is scoring. In and of itself makes it so it's like this guy could be a great defensive role playing starting big in the NBA. That's again all I have to say about that. My concern is that when people are, I think Donovan Clingan has helped his draft stock a lot, more so than Zach Edey in terms of, because a lot of people like myself are confused on, does this translate? We know it translates for Donovan Clingan, but once I start hearing number 1 overall pick again, I go back to the same argument with Reed Sheppard, which is the number 1 draft pick, no matter what, in any way, shape, or form, should always be the guy with the highest ceiling. In my opinion, it should always be the guy with the highest ceiling, not the guy, unless it's like, the Nuggets somehow got blessed with the number 1 overall pick and they're the best team or the Boston Celtics get the number 1 overall pick. You go for a guy that's going to help you immediately, right? But that's not a team that's going to have the number 1 overall pick typically. So yeah, I do think he's helped his draft stock. I do think he'll be a lottery pick, and I think there are a couple of teams out there that would really like Donovan Clingan on their team. I think he will be high floor, low ceiling kind of guy, because he can't really shoot very much in terms of, like I said, him and Zach Edey are so similar in different ways, but Donovan Clingan not being a stretch 5 probably doesn't help. Can he learn that? That's to be determined. The same with Zach Edey. It doesn't feel as much for Zach Edey, though, because if you're 7'4" and 300 pounds, you probably don't want him necessarily stretching the floor a lot. You probably want him being by the rim. But yeah, that's where I'm at with those two. I think Zach Edey will get drafted in the first round. It's just a matter of where and when, and that's all based on, can you run the gauntlet? Can you win March Madness and go up against Donovan Clingan? Go against DJ Burns, who's the next person we're going to talk about. DJ Burns for NC State has been incredible on the Cinderella story run. He really does look like a poor man's Nikola Jokic in a lot. And the main thing here is, do we think a team will take a gamble in the second round with a guy like that? Do you think you can build a Nikola Jokic clone? He'll never be Nikola Jokic, but we've seen that is a way to run an offense. Does someone take that gamble, especially like a rebuilding team? I don't know, but his touch around the rim has been phenomenal. I think questions of rebounding and defense are typically on the table. The main concern is rebounding. The passing is good. The scoring is good. And, if you're going for a Nikola Jokic-esque mold of a player, the defense is not the main concern here. He's not going to be great at defense. The concern is that what makes Nikola Jokic incredible is it's 3-level scoring plus the rebounding and passing. All of those create an offensive juggernaut of a player. The rebounding really needs to tick upward for DJ Burns, but my main thing here is I think you are stamping your ticket straight to the NBA if you can beat Zach Edey in the Final Four. To the final team and the final upset team to make it to the Final Four. For the first time ever, Alabama makes it. And I do want to come on here and apologize because, again, I got cursed yet again when I'm like, hey, we're not talking about RJ Davis enough. He's kind of like a Jalen Brunson player. Well, let me tell you about another Jalen Brunson mold, and might even be better comparison to Brunson, and that is Mark Sears of Alabama. They beat UNC, and then they beat Clemson. He looks a lot more like Jalen Brunson. I'll probably try and throw in some highlights of him here, but yeah, even just a second round pick, just to get, I know I've said a lot of times second round picks for guards are hard to convey in the NBA because typically you get a first round guard and that's itself works it out. But if Jalen Brunson can make it through a second round, I do think that Mark Sears could be, and there are certain teams out there that I just think a more veteran-esque player that's running the offense could really help teams like the Pistons, the Wizards, etc. Those teams that just need a little bit more veteran presence, even off the bench, as they develop more into the player they need to be in the NBA. And having a Jalen Brunson mold definitely helps that with how well Jalen Brunson has played this year in the past couple of years since he became a number one option. So shout out to Mark Sears in Alabama. Do I think they can beat UConn? Probably not, but again, they're on a magical run themselves. So now we move on to the teams that lost. I will try and make this one quick. So we're going to start with the tried and true. I'm a Duke fan, as you guys know. McCain's stock didn't change, in my opinion, at all. He still had an incredible game, even on a bad shooting night across the board for this team. I think the players most hurt by this are Mark Mitchell and Jeremy Roach, who I didn't really think would make the NBA in general, but it's just worth noting those guys had tough nights. And then the two that really kind of stood out is Kyle Filipowski. He had a great night against Houston, and I think that was his claim to fame in March Madness, was getting them over the hump against Houston. But I think this one also, it kind of evens itself out. I think he'll go exactly where he's mocked to go before, but I think the high of Houston and the low of NC State balance itself out. He got absolutely worked by DJ Burns in that game. His shooting has been really hit or miss all year, and the defense is kind of iffy. What a team needs to do if they draft Kyle Filipowski is essentially, you're going to need to develop this guy to be either a power forward or a center. In his Duke years, his freshman year, he was a power forward. This year, he was a center. And I think two of those things he shot the ball better last year, if I recall, just because he was stretching the floor out more. And this year, he's much better around the rim. Someone has to figure out which one it is, because to fit in the NBA, you got to know your mold, you got to know who you are. And at times it would be like, hey, be that power forward again. And it was like he had forgotten how to do that. And I'm not sure that he can be dominant enough as a center in the NBA. And then the question is, like, can he move quick enough to be a power forward in the NBA as well? So I think whoever drafts him really needs to develop him well. That situation will matter a lot. And if you go to a team that's ready to win now, he should, with a full-on contract, go down the G League and just refine his game to have a really good understanding of what he needs to be, whether that's a power forward or a center. And then, of course, Tyrese Proctor, who has been mocked from as high as the first round early in the year down to the second round. To me, it's very obvious you got to come back. Don't gamble with going in the second round. He's still a really young guy. He reclassified last year to even get to college as a 17-year-old, basically. So he's still really young. I think he's got to come back one more year, work on that shooting. That's the thing that broke the camel's back for the Blue Devils this time around. His shooting was just really bad. It was just a really bad game. It's a really bad shooting across the board. But McCain is the highest riser for Duke. And it sucks they lost, but NC State came to play in that second half, and Duke did not. Tennessee, I have never seen a performance where I can say, yeah, you guys lost, but your ass is absolutely going to the NBA. I guess the last one was probably Ja Morant from Murray State. Those first two games in 2019 March Madness, he basically came to play, and they just got outplayed in general, but he did not. And it was kind of like, you're going to be a top 3 pick for sure. You got it. And this one is kind of similar, just not top 3. But lottery pick for sure. Dalton Knecht goes out with a bang. 37, close to like 50% from the field. You know, he was phenomenal. And they were really close to just beating Purdue. It's just they didn't have someone to stop Zach Edey. Tennessee shot well, but as a predominantly jump shooting team, they just couldn't go to the free throw line to the same degree as Purdue, and they couldn't stop Zach Edey. And the way I kept thinking is a stretch 5, or I think it's just going to come down to a center is going to have to play his ass off against Zach Edey at this rate. And Tennessee didn't have that. But Dalton Knecht, you're stamping your way into middle to late lottery for sure. Not even a question. He's gone. He's going to be an NBA player. My friend Joe came up with the moniker a long time ago. This guy is just an American Bogdanovich, and I completely and utterly agree. He will be perennial sixth man of the year, if not starting caliber into sixth man of the year as time progresses for him, despite his age. For Illinois, this is the tale of just messing up at the exact wrong time and just never. It's like watching a team's spirit shatter in the middle of a game. It's just unfortunate. The second, like a lot of these, the tale of the game in the Elite Eight was the second half. In the second half, more so than even Duke, who really faltered, was Illinois, allowing UConn to just go on a 30-0 run. They had no answers. They just kind of gave up at a point, and it was just overall shocking. The player I want to talk about here is Terrence Shannon Jr., who had been having a great March Madness, and he is the sole player that I can actively say did not help or hurt his draft stock at all, even if it should have been helped through the majority of March Madness for Illinois. Because of his off-the-court issue, I think he's going second round at best, and I don't even know if that's going to be the case. But yeah, this one was just the lack of veteran presence, just getting out-coached, and just kind of giving up. And yeah, sad to see Illinois go out that way, but it is what it is. And then for Clemson, really here, this is the story of P.J. Hall. P.J. Hall had really helped himself during the year get his draft stock up. And I do think during March Madness, ironically, despite how far they went, he hurt his draft stock because he fouled out so many games. And a couple of those games early on, they could have lost. But those are hypotheticals. They didn't. But they did here. And this, to me, was, it's the one where it finally killed them. And a lot of that was kind of his passion can make you do interesting things, especially in a competitive, passionate state of basketball. And we've seen that from a lot of different players over time. But this is a player that gets really pissed when things don't go his way. And then he kind of takes it out on the other end and commits stupid fouls. And that's kind of, I think, the lack of defense, the irrational decision-making in terms of fouling when when things are not going his way, those kind of reared its ugly head during the Clemson run, and then inevitably put them away against Alabama. I think one more year, and you could end up being like a Dalton Connect kind of wing. Do I think you can make it into the lottery in 2025? Probably not, but I think one more year, just because of you're in like middle to late second round, that's going to be really hard to prove your worth at that age. I think going one more year, getting a little bit more experience, showcasing that this wasn't a fluke, that getting a little bit more emotional maturity would help. But yeah, that's probably where I'm at with PJ Hall. And that's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for watching, listening, all of that. Sub, like, comment, and I will see you guys next week for the final wrap-up, talking who won it all of that, and then looking forward to the NBA playoffs. And we're not really talking too much NBA as of recently because I think now is the perfect time to just let it naturally occur. Letting seeding play itself out and just ahead of the play-in, just really talk about it, talk about eliminations, what I think things are going to look like for teams, and all of that. So I'll see you guys next week to wrap up this March Madness, all these March Madness videos. So peace.